Resource Committee to order at 2:25. We're running behind, so I'll make a quick prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this day. We thank you for those that are here, and we ask special prayers for our tribal counselor, Mr. E.O. Smith, and pray that he recovers fully. As all of those who are suffering from this dreaded illness of COVID, I pray for their healing and ask that you lay your hand on all of us today as we do the business of the Cherokee people. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Hey, roll call.
E.O. Smith. Dawson.
Here.
Tyler Moser. Joe Bird. Julia Coates. John Crittenden.
Aye.
Joe Deere.
Aye.
Mike Dobbins.
Here.
Shannon Duncan.
Aye.
Darrell Legg.
Here.
Wes Snowfire.
Aye.
Laura Petzkowski.
Here.
Mike Shambaugh.
Here.
Mary Bakershaw. Ani. Denise Taylor.
Here.
Victoria Dush West.
Ani. Thank you, Shelley. Ask for approval of minutes for last month's meeting.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, we are ready for reports, and I see that Mr. Moore is on screen. Hello, David.
Good afternoon. How are y'all all doing?
Good, thank you. Good to see you.
I know y'all's meeting ran over in health, and there's a lot of good information about COVID, which I know is on everybody's mind, but y'all have my report. I just want to give you a couple of little highlights. In the COVID CARES Act that we spent, 85% of that to date has been spent in Terrell contracts. We're pretty proud of putting the money in Terrell hands, and we'll continue to strive to do that as well. On the bison, we're up to 168 head. We've had about a little over 1,700 bales of hay this year, so we're sitting good on hay. They have actually started selling that. So, any questions on the report?
Anybody? Yes, Baker. Ms. Shaw. Sorry.
Yes, David, will OSU, I have about two. Will OSU be completed as scheduled, the medical school?
Yes, they've already had substantial completion on the basement and first floor. And, we revised the date due to COVID, but yes, they're right on target. A few things, here and there could probably throw it off a few days, but hopefully not.
And then my last question, you were giving a report on the bison. Are we planning on using any of the bison? Are they going to be slaughtered for our processing plant to distribute to any of our citizens or for sale, or are you aware?
Once we get to a big enough number for that, we do plan on slaughtering our own bison. That's part of the plan.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Councilor Dobbins had a question.
David, when will the Durbin Feeling Language Center be completed?
We're going to start construction after the first of the year. We've had to kind of move things around, but due to COVID, we're right at 100% documents for review in the next week or so. Ooh. Can y'all still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, it just went blank. So it's about a year process once we get started.
Do we have any estimates on what that will cost to convert that
Not
building?
this time, not a good one. We'll get us a construction manager on. We're going to put things out for bid in December and try to get a construction manager on before the first of the year so we can start getting numbers in. I mean, we got a rough estimate, about 10 million, but that's a real rough.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? All right.
Councilman Vasquez has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Councilman Hopart.
On our buffalo project that we have up there, I know we're trying to get the herd to a large enough number to start processing them, and now we have this meat processing facility that we're trying to get going. What have we looked at as far as expanding that in a landmass? I know we have 14,000 acres up there, and we're using a couple hundred acres right now. The other acreage, they're leased, correct? They're currently being leased, right?
Yes, sir. We have, I think we have about 400 to 500 acres right now for the buffalo.
Okay.
Our plan is to slowly take back that land that we have leased out there that adjoins that property.
Okay. All right. That was just my question on that goes, and I think that's it. I think that's all the questions I have right now. All right. Appreciate it.
Okay, sure. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Thank you, David. And we have Chief of Staff like to say something?
Yeah, if I might add, to follow up on Councilor No Fire's question. So about a year ago, we actually doubled the amount of acreage that the buffalo ran on, so that we felt like that the space that they were in was too small, so we doubled that, pulling back one of those leases. As we continue to grow the herd and our population increases, we will incrementally size up to make sure that it's appropriate for the number of head that will be running on that property. But we did expand it just to make sure that the grass was able to turn over as buffalo were running across it, and so they didn't beat it down. So they actually got to more of a plains environment, what they're typically used to, with plenty of grass out there. So, but that will be one of the things we'll be looking at, is expanding it. But I think ideally the herd population that we're looking at to sustain it on an annual basis for what we want to try to accomplish with feeding elders and supplementing food distribution is somewhere between 300 and 350 head, and then we'll harvest the animals quarterly.
That's good to know. Thank you. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Counselor Buzzard.
Todd, is there any plan to add cattle to the operation?
Yes, that is one of the things we've been discussing, is supplementing that and actually starting to produce beef as well. And so that's one of the things we're taking a look at of where we could do that, and ideally how many head we'd be looking at to facilitate that. Yeah.
Anyone else? All right. Moving on. Real estate services, Ginger Reeves.
Yes, I think you have my report, and I'll be happy to address any questions you may have.
Thanks, Ginger. Anybody have any questions? Counselor Buzzard.
Yes, Ginger, can you give us an update on the land purchase? These were two properties.
I'm sorry, did you ask me for the update for land purchases?
Yes.
Okay. In your report, I had listed, since the last report, we have had two tracts that were purchased. One was the Owasso Soccer Facility in Owasso and the VNT Center in Vian.
Are there any long-term plans for those?
As far as the VNT Center, we released it back to a community group, to the VNT Community Foundation in Vian, and because you might be able to address the Owasso Soccer Facility better than I.
Todd?
Owasso property?
Yes.
Yes.
That is going to be, oh, I don't want to give this away just yet. Yes, we do have a long-term plan for that. I'd be happy to share it with a couple of you offline, because we want to make sure we make a proper announcement on that one, but I'd be happy to share with you individually before we make that announcement.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions of Ginger? If not, we'll move right on. Thank you, Ginger, for your report. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Environmental programs, that will either be Tom Elkins or someone for him.
Good afternoon. I'm here on behalf of the environmental programs. If there's any questions, certainly take those. I think the report has been circulated.
Sure, thanks, Chad. Anybody have any questions for Tom's department? All right, guess not. I guess we're ready for you now for your big report.
All right, thank you. A couple of updates wanted to provide following up work from last month. I mentioned last month that we were looking forward with our EV infrastructure project for our bus transit system. We've acquired the buses on site. We've completed all the training with our transit group, and we've almost finished construction of the Stillwell site bus charger, which I anticipate being done this month. And broke ground last week on the Tower Casino property for a second bus charger, and hope to have that by the end of the year. So it's moving along as fast as we could expect. With some COVID delays on the front end, putting this in a place to kind of play some catch up. But the buses are on their way. At least one of the buses is on its way to Tulsa for wrapping, and our goal is to have both of these in service and supplemented the existing transit system by the end of the year or the very first of the year. One other project I wanted to update on is safety. I know I went into quite a bit of detail and discussion on the safety issue last month at Resource Committee, and also when the resolution was discussed at the Rules Committee. And so if there are any questions that have arisen since then that any folks have, I'll certainly take those. But I mentioned in both of those instances that we were joining a work group with other tribes that are impacted by this to put together what we hope to be a collective next steps. At the time, we've met a couple of times, mostly before the presidential election, which I think we all agreed, we'd have a better lay of the land going forward once the election has resolved. And so that's, obviously going to inform that conversation for that work group. And we meet again this Thursday, and hopefully we'll be able to line out some of the next steps. The only other update I wanted to give you was the hunting and fishing compact. As you know, we've been working on compact discussions with the state of Oklahoma very regularly, and at times every other week, with our counterparts at the Oklahoma Secretary of Energy and Environment's office and the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation. Initially, our goal was to hammer out a longer-term compact that included additional tags with privileges and expanded access for at-large citizens. We made that request early on. I think we had some good conversations, but overall, I don't think it proceeded very well, and I believe that's in part related to all the ongoing tensions that the tribes share with and us share with the governor's office. And I don't think anyone's surprised by that, but we weren't really able to get a whole lot of traction. At this point, McGirt has changed the conversation quite a bit. That was a very profound decision, as you folks are aware from all the debate and discussion that we've had before the council. I don't think at this point we're in a position to agree to a longer-term compact. There's additional considerations based on McGirt, based on the inability to kind of move along with the priorities that we laid out on the front end. So I don't think that we are there yet. I mentioned in the past that the longer-term compact would have included additional funding on ours to accommodate regulatory changes on the federal laws that trigger the conservation payouts from licenses being issued, which is the math that makes this thing work. And so, I don't think we're there yet, and we're certainly reevaluating what this is going to look like in a post-McGirt world. We have offered a one-year temporary extension of the existing compact that'll give us kind of a runway of time to address this issue further. It also provides a pathway to maintain continuity of licenses that we've already issued across the state. At the moment, we've issued nearly 130,000 licenses this year, which we would issue annually and subject to the next extended compact if that will materialize. We have to consider that roughly 57 to 58,000 of those licenses go to Cherokee Nation citizens within Oklahoma who hunt and fish off reservation. So those would be our at-large Cherokees. Each license brings significant value, almost $100, I believe, on each license that we issue, and it extends these privileges to hunt and fish across the state, not just within our reservation boundaries. So being mindful of the large number of at-large Cherokee citizens that benefit from this and a program that would otherwise apply within the 14 counties is kind of one of the bases for why having a little bit more time to discuss this in the following McGirt, maybe a different place in relations with the state going forward is helpful. At the moment, there are only two compacted tribes on hunting and fishing, the Choctaw Nation and us, and they've offered the same proposal to the state. We're largely the same reasons. I know I'm in touch with my counterpart there on a weekly basis, hammering out what, the issues that are kind of common to both tribes in this bill. And we're both proceeding in the same fashion. I should have an update in my next month's meeting as to whether or not that proposal is accepted by the state, and then in the absence of such acceptance, what our plan going forward is going to be, which would be issuing licenses in accordance with our existing code. And so hopefully next month I'll have a much more defined path as we get close to the end of the year. Those are the main issues that I wanted to present today, and if there's any questions, I can certainly answer.
Thank you, Chad. Yes, Councilor Legg.
Chad, this is Darrell Legg. I am wondering about the pine trees. Have we heard anything from anybody on what we are able or not going to be able to do with any of those?
Yes, sir. So we're not, at least in my mind, I'm not ready to rule out this project. We've been pushing the BIA very hard, as I've mentioned in past meetings. We did receive an extension from the NRCS for the cost share money that we were provided. And that's crucial because that money is what offsets the losses that are going to be associated with the timber cutting operation as approved by the BIA. And so we have these different agencies that have to kind of come together and make this project work. We have followed up with the BIA based on the last letter that we sent where we requested that they provide a waiver of what I view to be these very arcane rules for timber cutting specifically within the state of Oklahoma. And these requests were sent to the Eastern Regional Office. I believe that they can waive those regulations based on this situation and these circumstances. But again, it's the BIA, and they can be difficult to deal with. We've reached out and asked for a response to the letter that we sent asking for the extension, and they've agreed to have a not necessarily an in-person meeting. We'll probably host it by some virtual platform, but we are going to meet specifically and all of us to talk about this project and talk about this issue. And we're looking at scheduling dates now, and I think it's going to be shortly after Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Chad.
But I don't believe this project is dead, and we're still pushing it. Admittedly, it's frustrating, but we're doing our best.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. Councilor Shambaugh, and then Councilor Butler.
Yes, sir. So going back to the compact on our hunting license, it's going to, I guess, be the same bag limit for deer as it has been in the past?
For a temporary extension, yes, it would be.
And
Now, if we work to a longer-term compact, or if we find ourselves in a position of issuing licenses, it would be subject to the bag limits and season dates of existing law.
okay. Well, if that comes to pass, I think there's several of us who have some input we would like to share about bag limits
Yes, sir.
in different seasons. All right, thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right, Councilor Buzzard has a question. Yes.
Yes, and that was one of my questions too, Chad, but the other question is, do other reservation Indians, tribe, have to have hunting and fishing license?
I'm sorry, Councilman, I couldn't quite hear your question.
Does the Navajo Nation have to have, their citizens have to have hunting and fishing license?
Do all tribal nations, was that the question?
On reservations.
Any reservation?
I don't know that all reservations necessarily require a individual licensing scheme. The way it generally works, at least as it's been treaty reserve hunting and fishing rights have been interpreted by the Supreme Court and others, is it's a coextensive right that could exist with non-Indians that live in the reservation boundary. So you wouldn't necessarily have to have a fishing license for tribal citizens to exercise their rights to the extent that those rights are made available under a treaty, which we do have. You would have to have some system of management, but it wouldn't necessarily have to look like or mirror what the state does. You know, one of the things I think that's important just to remember is whenever you look at bag limits and season dates in most states across the country, and including Oklahoma, it's not based on some type of line in the sand that was arbitrarily developed. It's based on habitat management and population control as studied through science. And so, I mean, like for example, in Oklahoma, in the early teens, 1910s or 1930, there was almost no deer population in this state. They were virtually non-existent, and to the tune of maybe only a few hundred. For probably 20 years, hunting white-tailed deer was illegal in the state in order to repair that population to what it is today. And so I get that a lot from the Cherokee citizens asking me why we have to follow bag limits and why we have to follow season dates. It's based on conservation science. And so whatever scheme we would implement here at the tribe would not necessarily be a license based, but it would certainly have to be based on the science of conservation.
Yes, well, I think in the state of Kansas, if you're a native in that state, you don't have to have a license to hunt up there. So, I don't know, I'm glad to hear that this is a temporary compact with the state, so we can actually have some input onto it. Thank you for that report.
Yes, sir.
Counselor Shambaugh has a follow-up question.
I just had a follow-up on that, and because of that, I think we should obviously go by what the state does on bag limits, but I know quite a bit about this because they've extended the deer season into January for does because it is overpopulated, and at the same time we get one deer, and you know, and deer season starts in November, but it goes into January. So there's a lot of does to be harvested. That's why they extended that season. But also something that we should look at too is we need to have a little common sense if we do that, because a lot of those does at that time have babies already inside them in January, because that's just the way it is. So we need to be cognizant of maybe some things that the state aren't either. I think that's important for us to probably take the lead on that, because I know for a fact that there's been those deers killed and they've already have small babies at that time of the year. But there is an overpopulation of deer, and I think we should benefit from that as well, our people.
Absolutely, I'll definitely take note of that and consider that along with other changes that we would implement in the longer term code.
Counselor Nofar.
Just kind of put it in perspective, I think, because we're all in agreement, at least some of us on council, talking about it with the bag limits and whatnot, and the importance of, you know, luckily it's just a temporary compact, but moving forward, just to keep in your mind, did you grow up hunting or fishing or eating deer meat or anything like that when you were growing up?
Absolutely.
Okay, so in my district, it's that way, but it's the way I grew up too, which is a livelihood. And in fact, that was kind of the only meat we served in our house was either what we caught or what we killed when I was little. And so it's still that importance in our community. That's something that the state doesn't receive or doesn't have very much knowledge about, that I think we could implement in as far as controlling bag limits and making the changes to where we could bag more does maybe earlier in the season before they're bred versus what the state's doing, and kind of making it more of a centralized important as far as our limits and our regulations for this area based off of what our citizens need instead of what the state needs. And I think that's the reason why I've been so proactive in talking with you and saying, you know, these compacts really need to mirror more advantages towards us instead of all the advantages to the state. And I know that there's been extensive research and study dealing with limits, but they're not taking those into considerations for the food needs for our Native Americans that are in here in this reservation. So it's just something to keep in mind as we're moving forward, is telling the state what we want and not instead of the other way around. So that's something that's an important thing.
Absolutely, Council. I would point out that you know, I don't necessarily see it as a one-sided win for the state as opposed to the tribe. I mean, this is a substantial benefit that's available to at-large citizens in particular, that and everyone who gets to hunt and fish all within the state for, you know, $2, and that's the equivalent of roughly $100 worth of value. I do think that, you know, whenever we look towards a longer-term goal, obviously subsistence hunting and fishing is something that's always been important to the Cherokee Nation. It's always been important to Cherokee citizens. And that's something that we would weave into a longer-term agreement. And I don't know that that necessarily would, be in the form of a compact, but let's say if we find ourselves in a circumstance to make potential revisions to our code. The existing code already has quite a bit of differences, I would say, as compared to for specific animals and specific manners of take that you wouldn't find on the state law. And a lot of those are based on reasons specific to the Cherokee Nation. And so, one retention gives us more time to evaluate what this means in a post-McGirt world. And I don't know if we're going to ultimately end up with a longer-term compact, but those conversations began and ended with changes that were, more beneficial to the tribe in terms of having additional capital for costs because of the regulatory changes that drive the compact fees.
Well, I definitely think it's definitely one to be discussed more. I think even bringing some lay citizens to discuss more on our jurisdictional issues and how it can be affected. I know that we have some former retired patrol officers and game wardens who could also like implementing on how those changes might be made while moving forward with the state. They've grown up around here, they know the needs, and they also know what the state regulatory body is best beneficial for the wildlife management, but also best beneficial for these areas and these citizens around here. You have one of the ex-highway patrol officers used to be a fishing warden because they took that over back in the late 90s, I think. And he's retired. He's right here out of Tahlequah, Cherokee County. I'm sure he would be a great person to talk to on how some of those things might be implemented. But it just might be something to reach out to some of our other citizens. But appreciate you, madam.
Yes, sir. Anyone else have any questions? Yes, Councilor Buzzard.
Just had a follow-up question. Chad, we know, I think most of the council members know what kind of compact the Choctaws have with the state of Oklahoma, and I'm wondering how we fell that much short. One deer when they can get 3 deer.
I think that you can't compare the Choctaw Nation Compact with the Cherokee Nation Compacts. They're almost apples to oranges, right? I mean, it is true that their compact has quite a bit more privileges, but when you look at the price tag, they paid pretty much double what we did for that. The privileges that we had, and we were the first compact to come out of the gate. The privileges that we had are by and large reflect what I hear from Cherokee citizens. This is a very popular program. By and large, they seem to be overall satisfied with the number of privileges that they receive. Now, of course, you can receive all the privileges, but you have to pay for them. A differing factor for us is, we receive up to 150,000 licenses, whereas the Choctaw Nation would do, I think they're doing around 50. You're talking exponentially more in terms of costs. So you can get into a different type of compact, but you're also going to get into millions of dollars. And so that's the balance that we've been trying to strike here over the conversations we've had this year and subsequently based on, or as we evaluate where we're ultimately going to land.
Okay, well, that explains part of it, but I think you said a while ago there was around 57 or 58,000 users of this, because a lot of the elders that are past 65 all get license free. Veterans get license free. Kids under 16 don't have to have a license. So to me, we're paying a big price, I'd say. Anyway, thanks for that analysis.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else?
Yes, council members, if you have any recommendations on how to improve on this compact that we're going to negotiate here in the near future, write those comments down and let's give them to our legal counsel. And all we're doing is recommending to the executive branch what we think that how we can improve on some of these policies that's in the compact. So if you guys want to do that, because a lot of you guys, this is how you live, this is how your constituents live. So let's write some of these recommendations down and give them to Tim, see where it goes. How about that? Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, anybody else? Okay, thank you, Secretary Harsher. Moving on, yes. No old business pending, no new business pending, and anyone have any announcements for this committee? If not, the only one we have is the next meeting is tentatively scheduled for December 14th at 2 p.m. and move for adjournment.
Make a move.
We're adjourned, thank you.